Hi everyone. I'd like to start with a review of levels of measurement. We learned this last week. Nominal, ordinal, and interval ratio levels of measurement. When I go about the world talking to people, I note what things vary, and I will ask myself, is this a nominal variable, an ordinal variable, or an interval ratio variable? Religion is our classic example. We're going to give every religion a number, and we're going to say, oh, you're Catholic. Okay, that's number 3. Okay, you're Baptist. That's number 4. You're Jewish. That's number 5. And we're giving it a number. But the numbers have no mathematical power. They have no mathematical meaning. They're just there so that we can use it for computer reasons. And then we tally it up. We have 100 Catholics, 200 Jews, 500 Baptists, etc. The other type of measurement is called ordinal. That's where the numbers actually have meaning. They signify some sort of ranking. Letter grades are our classic example. They have little to no mathematical power. We can't subtract an A from a B. We can't subtract a B from a C. There's no ability to add, subtract, multiply, and divide. The last type of variable is an interval ratio level of measurement. Most of our time and distance measurements are interval ratio. Money is interval ratio. These are meaningful units, and they have absolute mathematical power. Why? Because we can add, subtract, divide, and multiply them. We can do lots of mathematical transformations to them. So for the purposes of statistics and a review, interval ratio is the best type of data we can have. Ordinal is fine. We can totally use it. Nominal data is fine. We can use it. In some cases, we have to use nominal data. But the mathematical power and the things that we can do, we have our hands tied behind our back with nominal. There's a lot of things we can't do. Okay, that's our review. Let's go forward. Today's class is going to be about descriptive statistics. Descriptive statistics involve giving meaning to data, organizing data, allowing us to summarize a large amount of information with 1 to 2 numbers. If somebody tells me an average and a standard deviation, in my mind, I can see that data and I know what it looks like. And that's because I'm a statistician, and I'm trying to train you to be a statistician so that you can summarize large amounts of information with very little information. We want to understand and communicate the essence of observation with avoiding the problem of becoming disoriented with a flood of unimportant details. We just want to say, here are the numbers that matter. Here's an average, here's a standard deviation, here's a bar chart. You don't need to know anything else. That's the most important stuff. That's what descriptive statistics is all about. The best way to explain that to you is actually to show you what it would be like to look at a huge data set. Sometimes, as a statistician, you might be dealing with tens of thousands of observations. You might have a million points of data. So I'm going to show you a small data set just for a moment. Imagine this was your data set. We're on page 1 of 20, and we've got some income data, right? So this is page 1 of 20. This is page 2 of 20. This is page 3 of 20. This is page 4 of 20 of our data. This is page 5 of 20 of our data. Am I making my point to you? Sometimes when you have a data set, it's just rows and rows and rows of numbers and columns of numbers. So if we use what we're going to learn today, which is called measures of central tendency and variability, we use both of them. These two types of measure together can help us describe data sets that have millions of points of data without looking at every score. When I first started doing statistics, I was actually amazed because I always wanted to look at my data. And there are some programs out there where you almost never see your data, but I like to see my data. And sometimes when you're doing statistics, you don't need to look at your data. It's there, you know it's there, you can take a look at it, you can peek. But for the most part, if somebody tells me a measure of central tendency, and they tell me about a measure of variation, that's all the information I really need on a variable sometimes. That's a good starting point, and that's what I'm trying to communicate here. We're describing data, lots of information with 2 numbers. So chapter 6, we're talking about descriptive statistics, And these are our objectives for today's lecture. We're going to be talking about measures of central tendency, location, spread, and skewness. I'm going to cover what a measure of central tendency is. We're going to talk about 3 measures of central tendency: the mean, the median, and the mode. We're going to talk about the meaning of a measure of variation or diversity. And we're going to look at a few ways of looking at variation and diversity. The measures are range, skewness, standard deviation, and IQV. I'll explain each one of those. And we're going to end the whole lecture with considerations for choosing an appropriate descriptive statistics. One of the goals of this course is, if I say to you, hey, you have a nominal level data, you should know, what type of measures should I use? Should I be using standard deviation or IQV? Should I be using mean, median, or mode? Should I be doing a chi-squared test or an ANOVA or a regression? If it sounds like I'm speaking another language, I am. I'm speaking statistics. But the point I'm making is that the type of data you have is going to shape the type of statistics you can use. And that's one of the main arguments of this entire course, is that if you don't know what type of data you have, you don't know what you can do with it and what you can't do with it. So that's what I'm going to cover in that 3rd bullet point: considerations for choosing appropriate descriptive statistics, and I'll teach you it. So let's just cover what is a measure of central tendency. A measure of central tendency tells us what is average or typical. A measure of central tendency tells us what's normal in a way, right? It's the central tendency. It's what most people are doing, or sort of like the center of the distribution. So I read this article by a guy named John Allen Paulos, and he says we need to bridge the gap between stories and statistics. We actually use different language to talk about these 2 different worlds. So if you're a storyteller, you might say usually, typically, customarily, most of the time, in a standard situation, in a normal situation, ordinarily. Oh, it was a very medium approach to something, or very commonplace. So these are all words that we use in stories to communicate what's called a central tendency, what's normal, right? And in the world of mathematics, we have the same idea, but we just use a different terminology. So instead of saying usually, typically, and most of the time, we say mean, median, and mode. Now, I'm making a simplification here, but I hope you're understanding. I'm trying to bridge that gap between stories and statistics. And there really isn't the wall that we think is there. It's not there. They're actually trying to do the same thing. They just go about it differently. So I'd like you just to think about this over the coming week. If you're a sociologist, why do you want to know what's normal, typical, or common? If you're a marriage and family therapist, why do you need to know what's normal? If you own a business or you're a business manager, why do you need to know about normality? Why do you need to know about the average? Why do you need to know about the typical? If you're a car salesman, why would you need to know that? What about being a teacher? If you were a teacher, why would you need to know about what's normal, typical, usual, common? Why would you need to know those things? Same thing as if you're a medical doctor. Why do you need to know what's normal and typical? Why do citizens or students need to know? Why are we doing this? So I'm not going to give you the answer to this. And to be honest, this is an old test question. I wrote this as an essay. I said, hey, why do real people in real jobs need to know about this stuff? And what I'm trying to impress upon you is everybody does use statistics. Once you get to a certain sort of place in the workforce, most people are using statistics. Doctors understand statistics, teachers do, salesmen do, therapists do. So a lot of us are using it, but why? I want you to think about the great need that's being fulfilled by understanding what's common, typical, normal. Again, here's my sources for this part of the lecture. J. Allen Weinstein's book, Applying Social Statistics, is a great one. I took a course with Michael Starbird at UT about statistics, and I've also got the John Allen Paulos right there. I've got to give a citation for that. So what we're going to learn over the course of these lectures is the mean. which most people just call the average. It's actually a scary way of saying the average. It's mean. But if you know how to calculate an average, you already know what the mean is, so you're in good shape. The median is the middle position, and I'll show you how to find that. It cuts the data in half, 50% above that point, 50% below that position. And the mode is the largest category. And as I said, we're going to have a lecture on each one of these measures of central tendency. You might want to make a flashcard, measures of central tendency, flip it over. The mean is 1, the median is 1, the mode is 1. You've got 3 measures. And I will use that language over and over. So on a test, if you see measure of central tendency, you should know what it means. And it means mean, median, or mode. Okay, we'll stop there. And when we pick up, I will explain each one of these measures of central tendency.